All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the weekly SIG Docs meeting. It is February 2nd, 2021, which is crazy. It's February already. I'm Jim Angel, a co-chair of SIG Docs, kicking off our regular weekly meeting here. So before we get started, I know we were just chatting. Is it Comaville? So just start chatting with Comaville about new contributors, and I'd like to give an opportunity, Comaville, if you'd like to introduce yourself, as well as if there's anyone else joining us who is new.
Well, hello, I'm from Uruguay. I think my video stream is good, but I'm not sure, so you tell me. I just want to be here, mostly in mute mode because I don't want to participate, I just want to listen. Maybe a few questions. I will do some questions on the chat, but not too much talk. If you agree with that, or if you have any personal question or you need to know more about me, just ask and I will unmute the microphone.
Awesome.
One more thing, I say this to Jim, but not to everyone. I will learn the process of contribute to the documentation, and I'm not ready yet. So thank you for your contribution to let me know how this works.
Awesome. Yeah, that's exactly what we're here for, and happy to help out. And what I added to the agenda, we have a relatively short agenda today, I believe. So I added to the last piece on the agenda to have kind of an open Q&A for new contributors, folks who want to learn a little more. Tim, you did that a week or so ago, and I thought that worked out really well. And so I like to get in the habit of that for new folks, just for a time at the end there. Before moving on, is there any other new contributors joining us today? See a lot of friendly faces. Awesome. Let's move on. So the updates and reminders. This week's PR Wrangler is Celeste, and next week's is Earview. And PR Wranglers, make sure you know your shifts. The links are in the agenda. So going on to the agenda for release 121. Ray, I thought you weren't going to be here.
Yeah, I'm meeting ended early.
Awesome. Well, happy to have you. Do you want to take over for the status out for 121?
So for the release 1.21 for release docs, the status is green. Last week we did a branch sync for the dev 1.21 branch, and that was merged. I have the PR listed in the agenda. A week from today is enhancements freeze. So that's on February 9th. There are 32 enhancements currently. There's actually 34 now. That number is going to fluctuate until enhancements freeze. So that even this 32, it might be 40, it might be 35, or it might be 28 by next week. So keep that in mind. Also, I am started to sign enhancements to the rest of the docs team. And so we'll have that finalized at the end of the week. And that's it for me.
Awesome. Sounds great. And Divya, I know I brought this up last week about something that's coming down the pipelines this week. I think you would do it more justice talking to this point, if you don't mind explaining a little bit about what you wanted to bring to SIGDocs awareness and how we can help.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. I am Divya, and I have worked with SIG docs before for as a release shadow for the release docs in 1.19. This cycle I'm the release comms lead, and uh, we trying to streamline the process around communications for every release, since it's not so well structured and it mostly involves us going around and asking a lot of folks for the feature blogs, and then having a last couple of days after the cycle ends, trying to get reviews in, and that's potentially something uh, we want to avoid this cycle. So one of the things that we were looking at doing is actually setting some soft deadlines around the feature blog delivery and the merging, of course, will draw from, I think, Tim's automation, where we can specify the merge or publish it prior to the, when we actually write the blog actually. So we can do that, but I I wanted to hear your views as well, so that we all as a team could work together and have a consensus on the way the feature blogs are published and reviewed, because that was one of the pain points that came up last release during the retro. So that's point A. The second point is that there is also a major deprecation that's going in the cycle, but we haven't figured out how to sort of um, the communication process around it hasn't been again streamlined, because we are still in the phases wherein the alternatives haven't actually been put in place. And SIG Contrapex actually has been working on a blog for that. So I also wanted your views on how we could publish this blog better, in a better fashion, in order to avoid the Dogecoin panic um, that happened last cycle. So this is a deprecation for the PSP policies, and as of now the SIGOT folks are trying to get in the alternatives into this cycle, but in the form of a KV. But it's not it might or might not be possible, and that's something we'll only know once the enhancement freeze is in. So I'm not sure how to figure out the dates around this, and we've been having discussions with the release leads and the enhancement owners as well. So wanted your opinion as well on this. Sorry if that was too much of a brain dump. Sorry.
No, that was perfect. I appreciate that. I definitely have thoughts, but I'd like to open this up if anyone else wants to chime in. You're not a lot of volunteers here. No big deal. So my thoughts around the process is really, and let me back up and give a little bit of context on the release process as it pertains to communications. Um, I want to say in the early teens, 1.11, 1.12 of the Kubernetes release cycle, the communications were originally handled by the CNCF. There was an official person delegated from the CNCF to help get those communications out the door. And it was kind of like they did it, we didn't really worry about it, and everyone kind of went along doing their own thing. There was a decision maker and kind of a leader in that process. And since then, and this is totally my opinion, it's possible it's different. I haven't worked in the actual comms special interest group or the release team, but it seems like what has happened over the past couple of release cycles, at least as of late, is it's more of a community effort. It's more volunteer based, more contributor based, and what has happened is there's no real clear leader. There's a lot of I guess interested parties such as SigDoc, the release team, folks who are trying to get enhancements in, but there's no clear person to say this needs to go out the door at this time at this, and really that leader role I think is somewhat missing. And I don't know if it really existed before as much as it was just inherently implied by the CNCF running that communication area. And so I know I've talked a little bit with the Divya, and my suggestion was that the communications team can take a stronger stance of a leadership role, saying here's when the blogs are coming in, here's when things are getting merged, and really have folks looking to them for guidance. And I don't know if they'll necessarily solve the problem, but I think establishing that leader in that timeline is really where I feel like there's a gap that didn't exist before, whether on purpose or not. And that's kind of my 2 cents and where I'm at today, but happy to hear other folks' thoughts. Tim?
I guess my opinion is that deprecation is such a deprecation of something like pod security policy is such an important thing that if we had a comms person and they reached out to the SIG and the SIG was like, oh well, we're reluctant to do comms, we're at capacity, we can't liaise with you to get the comms out on time, I would be like thinking, delay the deprecation or like turn the release red. It's that important.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Tim, in that respect. But we have a blog and we have sort of um, outline ready, but the problem here is that when we are suggesting a deprecation, we obviously have to sort of outline the alternatives as well, and alternatives is something that um, specifically hasn't been addressed yet. I've not taken a look at the KEPs yet because my laptop unfortunately crashed a couple of hours ago, and I've been trying to revive it. But yeah, that's where we were at in the morning when I checked, and there was no alternative. There were no alternatives outlined for that specific deprecation. And if we actually put out a blog saying that, hey, this particular feature is going to be deprecated, and what this means for you as an end user, we also have to sort of give the other side of the coin wherein we lay out the alternatives. So that's why we're currently holding out on the on releasing the blog. And I guess Segot folks have sort of I don't know how do you put it. So a lot of folks have been instrumental in getting the blog in place. And Sigoth has sort of contributed their technical expertise, and the contributor experience guys have actually gone through the pains of actually writing the blog. So a rough draft is ready, but we are going to be holding back and understanding what would be the alternatives if they are going in this cycle. If not, we have to give the end user a broad list of available stuff that's already available. So yeah, that was a plan, but I was not really sure of how to actually go ahead with the publishing. So that's what me and Nabroon and me and Stephen and a lot of folks from Segot and Contribix have been discussing so far. Because one viewpoint is that if we are actually going to be publishing something before the release, um, it's we need to decide a timeline again. How soon is it to publish a blog, and how soon is it to actually disclose that sort of information. On the other hand, if we actually put it after the release, it's going to be like the Dokushim panic that happened last cycle. So we need to sort of decide on that timeline. And I was looking for your opinions as well on that, if you had any sort of views around when this could be published. So this I'll be communicating back to the release lead tomorrow, um, as part of the release call. I mean, release team call that we have every Wednesday.
If I hear you correctly, part of your concern, it sounds like you're concerned about a backlash from the user community. Is that correct?
Yeah, we sort of had that last cycle when Dokushim was announced to be deprecated, but it was unnecessary panic, and it was because there was a tweet, and someone had gotten a look at one of our release notes, I guess, and had blown it up out of proportion. So a lot of folks had to come in and uh, mitigate the impact that it had caused by reassuring folks that it's not that big a deal. So yeah.
Having seen my organization Red Hat go through this recently on a completely different issue, it's never too soon to send out bad news. I understand that you're waiting for more detail, more alternatives, but the way you can do is you can stage it. You can say, you know, here's some bad news coming your way. These are the alternatives we know about. Um, we're not sure about this area, and we will communicate with you. We'll follow up with you on this date. So let them know specifically when your follow-up comms will come out. And in some sense, they may wait and hold back for that. But if it's something that might upset some users, it's better to tell tell them now so that they can begin planning for it. That's all I would say. Thanks.
Essentially, deprecation is telling people that it's not going to be available in the future, so they can begin planning for it. So we're planning about the comms around the deprecation announcement, really. I mean, I don't know. I think it's pretty set in stone that it's going, but I don't know that like it's 100% going. Like, if there was a real problem, I guess we could put pod security policy back in. What I think is more likely is, it's going, and we want a good story so that the deprecation announcement that happens as early as possible is a good announcement. In my mind, there are 3 dates that are important. There's the date when we make, the announcement. There's the post-release date when we remind people that we've made the announcement. Say, okay, we've released it now. It's not just announced, it's official, it's happened. Here's your reminder. We meant it the first time. And then there's a 3rd date, which is kind of what I was trying to say about, when is it getting a bit worrying? This is what Divya and the docs release team are worrying around. Like, what's the date that by which time we want the relevant people to have committed to say, like, we have identified an alternative, we have committed to whatever. What's that date? Because that is kind of a deadline. We want to, if we don't do it by then, we're going to have some other option. And I think working out what that date is, when do we need a comms plan, is the one that I'm not clear on. Is that actually, we need it right now? I don't know.
And I would be in the opinion more, in line with what Rolf was mentioning, as far as, it seems like this is inevitable. If we don't have the information in place, we can give kind of a teaser, a teaser of bad news, I guess, if you will. But I do agree that no one's going to be mad that we over communicated, or, I say we as a collective Kubernetes org, not just Big Doc, but we as a community over communicated some of these changes, and, being right under the radar with the exact information that's needed. I feel like it's hard to get upset about over communication, at least in this sense. And I think that it would be valuable to emphasize, sooner rather than later, at least getting it publicized out there. Now, saying that, I do feel like this is relevant to the folks who are on bleeding edge Kubernetes, and they know the pains that come with dealing with bleeding edge Kubernetes. And, I'm one of those. I wear the bleeding edge hat, and I know the pains and the problems that come with, dealing with bleeding edge Kubernetes. However, I think being realistic here, what we want to do is get this on people's radars for their upgrade cycles. So if they're saying, N-1, they know in 2 upgrades now they're going to be dealing with this pain, and whatever that cycle means to them, they can plan, accordingly, whether it's their sprints or whatever their upgrade plans are. So I see no harm in going out the door as soon as possible, even if we don't have all of the alternatives in place, with more of a teaser that things are coming down the road. And I do like the idea of establishing, here's when the next update is coming, setting that deadline and the expectations of, here's the next update that we're going to send out, where you're going to have more information, where you'll have those alternatives. And I don't think when it comes to deprecations, as far as, in the open source community, I don't think we can over communicate here, in my opinion.
Who on the call saw sort of like the Twitter storm or the related media storm around, the Docker shim deprecation? What did we get wrong? I want to hear what people think we got wrong.
What we got wrong communication-wise, or why it wasn't so scary?
What should we have learned from it? From anyone?
For me, I believe that the main communication should come from the us, or this organization, this community, versus social media. For me, that's where we got wrong. Where, yeah, our draft release notes are available on GitHub, and people could go through them and find them. But I believe that the main communication should come from this community, even just when those draft release notes are out, because they are available for people to look at them.
Can I put a in my opinion, it was the one word was the problem. It was the word deprecation. When you say we're deprecating Docker engine, right? When you say we're replacing Docker engine with CLI and containerd, which comes from Docker engine and is essentially the same thing, everyone goes, okay, so what?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's more about how we choose our wording. And it seems like it can be interpreted to other options and it's not clear enough. So it's causing like panic in the public.
So like if whoever tweeted it, I can't remember who tweeted it, had checked and had that tweet reviewed by someone like Mike Brown, who works on containerd, they would have caught this immediately and said, hey, wait a minute, this is, you know, would have said it the way that you described. It's a replacement. It's reducing one layer of shim. It's not a big deal. So I mean, I guess a couple things. I mean, I guess we would caution people about going and reading draft release notes and turning them into tweets. And if you are going to tweet, ideally the tweet would then reference an official press release or something from the foundation if something was if warranted of that. Hopefully this doesn't happen that often where people are doing that and deciding to wanting to be first with the breaking news and then, you know, in the meanwhile scaring poor Jim to death.
And also, I think the hesitation that I'm hearing from you right now says that the hesitation about this new deprecation notice tells me that you've learned the lesson from that other situation. You're empathetic with your audience. How are they going to read this? How are they going to feel about this? And so you're already trying to anticipate and address that up front. And that's a very good thing. I think that other deprecation of Docker, it seems like whoever communicated that wasn't being empathetic with how your audience would react and feel about it. They were technically correct. It was absolutely factually correct, but it wasn't empathetic.
I think everyone's spot on here, and I believe we're all have the same mindset, and there's not going to be that clear-cut answer of what the next steps are. I do think there's the overwhelming theme of, you know, more communication the better. And just real quick, I know we asked who was, you know, part of or who saw some of the Twitter saga. For the folks that didn't see, just for some context and what we're talking about here, is someone on Twitter saw some of the release notes, which currently go out the door as soon as we start cutting the, you know, alpha and beta releases of a new release. We automate all of our release notes communications to be generated when we build all the, you know, pre-release releases. And what that means is that anyone can go into our GitHub repository and look at releases before they go out the door and see the changes that are upcoming in future releases. And normally that's a good thing, and it still is a good thing today. I shouldn't say normally. And what happened was that the user saw those release notes in GitHub, posted on Twitter, you know, emphasizing the deprecation of Docker. Ultimately, it was a planned for event that was only impacting users who are on the bleeding edge when they were using the not the actual CRI shim itself. And I could be screwing up some of the details here, but essentially it wasn't as big of a deal as saying deprecating Docker. And I'm speaking from personal experience. A lot of folks when we're talking Kubernetes will kind of mix up Kubernetes and Docker and containerization. It's, you know, kind of one big blurry umbrella. So it can be very scary to hear that a big major component of Kubernetes is getting deprecated when that may or may not be the case. And in this case, it wasn't. Just for context for folks in the call who may not have saw that. And it raised up a lot of issues with overall communications in the community, how that was handled. It seemed like it was very poorly. The tweet went essentially viral in the sense of all the folks that cared were you know, all over it. And we started to see then subsequent articles getting published and you know, trying to set the record straight. And it was overall somewhat of a mess, you know, to be completely honest with everyone here. And it sounds like we're on the right path to do things better, in my opinion. And I believe we're all on the same page here. And go ahead, Tim.
I think that I'd like to see the blog like byline. I don't mind who's actually writing the blog, but if the blog byline mentions SIG security and there was input from Kubernetes SIG security, I think that would go a way to reassuring people. And I think it's like important to make sure we don't accidentally bypass that SIG.
I could definitely post the draft draft the pull request that has the first draft on the chat if it's required, and maybe we can actually maybe you could actually provide your inputs in that, I guess.
Yeah, and for the sake of time, I'll put the PR, if you don't mind throwing it in chat, I'll put it in the agenda, and we can definitely review that and either discuss more of it next week, or we could do it asynchronously in the SIG doc channel. But I would like to somewhat time box this if you feel like we've answered the questions or kind of answered all the questions you had for at least this initial meeting.
Yep, it totally did, and I've kind of noted down whatever we've spoken about today, and I'll make sure to provide that as updates in tomorrow's meeting.
Awesome, sounds good.
Thank you for all your help.
Thank you. Cool. And so moving on, blog update. Is there anyone here who wants to give us an update on the blog?
Tell me what that involves.
Sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry, what does anyone want to do what?
So the next agenda item is a blog update, and I was asking if there's anyone who is involved with this sub-project group involved with the blog who wanted to provide an update.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Not hearing a ton of volunteers, so we will move on. Let me copy this link here into the chat. As always, the blog is a sub-project of SIG Docs, and if anyone's interested in helping out with the blog, there is a special blog meeting. I believe it's on Thursdays, and there's more details in the channel itself on Slack. So moving on, there is nothing currently listed under issues and PRs, so I'll open this up. Does anyone have any current open issues on GitHub or PRs that they'd like us to discuss right now? All right, easy enough. Moving on to the open discussion. Abby, and tracking stale content in the website repo, a joyous topic. Do you want to take that one away?
Sure, I'm sure it's something everyone's been really excited about. So I did send an email out to the group last week to sort of send out some highlights of this. And I have a doc listed here. Do you want me to kind of go through that doc, or?
Yeah, I think it'd be great if you don't mind just setting some context on what we're trying to accomplish and then how we can help out. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, okay. So the basic overview of the project is to basically track stale content in the website's repo. So building out a way so that we know when the last time things have been updated, so that users will have more confidence that what they're actually seeing has been updated, has been verified as being the most accurate. And then hopefully that'll translate into some alleviating some support issues that come to the SIGs themselves, so that the people are using the most recent version of the docs, so they don't have to run into these issues and then have to be resolved by whatever SIG comes across they're asked questions to. So that's sort of the goal. So, well, that's like why we're doing it. And then the goals that we have for this project. So this sort of hinges on the definition of what we have as stale content. And basically what we're going off of is things that haven't been updated based on their last commit date in GitHub. Because it's just something easy to pull and easy to track. And then hopefully, like if something has been updated by something small, like a PR or a PR for updating a typo, the sort of assumption right now is that we have like a good faith that people who are updating the typo would have reviewed the whole page, or that the reviewer themselves would have reviewed the whole page and sort of looked into anything else that looked sort of out of date. That's obviously something we could talk about, and that might be something we have to fine grain later on, but that's sort of right now we're just going off of the last commit date of at least a year ago or more that hasn't been touched. And it's sort of how we're planning to do this is to go through the site, specifically the English language version of the site, and just the content that is published to the documentation section of the site. So not anything that's out on blog or community, so just the docs. And sort of find who the owners are and add in like some metadata at the top of the file that say, you know, like a SIG owner, SIG storage or something. So we have some reference of who would be the owning SIG. So if it comes up as flagged as stale, then we know who to reach out to. This is something that we'd have to talk to each SIG about. We'd also have to manually go through the files to sort of identify who that is. So that's sort of a big project to sort of put together. So doing this would actually take a lot of would take a lot of investment to get it all set up. And then how we're planning to sort of do finding things that are stale is to set up a script and have it just check files in the content docs folder and any like of the YAML files to see if it hasn't had the update, and sort of spit out like a little report or, you know, whatever related information that we need to identify pages that are stale. And so this, I mean, that would include like building out a tool that would automatically run that, or putting it into the Krell tool, which is the release tool, if I'm saying that correctly. So this would be, you know, coordinating with SIG release to get something put into that tool. And then also our idea for running this like continuously, so that we're continuously checking everything, is working with the release team, specifically the docs release person, early in the release cycle to sort of run the script, get an issue created with anything that comes back as being stale, and then working with any of the SIG owners who would own that content so that they could go through and check, say, yes, this is stale, should be either updated or removed, or it's actually fine. It's old content, but it's still fine. Like we didn't have to update it in that time. So that's sort of the process that we had. And it's not, this isn't going to be something that's release blocking. We're just trying to integrate it into the beginning of the release cycle to sort of have it happen frequently. We have to also work with SIG release and get a lot of buy-in for this process to be put into place. And then I think those are the highlights. If that sort of makes sense as a good stopping point, if people have some feedback. Anyone?
I think putting it in the release cycle is good. For the release docs team, usually in the first several weeks, it's kind of quiet until enhancements freeze. So that would be a good time frame to run the script and you know, add additional tasks to, you know, to track stale content or to track and contact SIGs to either update or approve the stale content.
Yeah, and I would definitely +1 this. I know, Abigail, we've chatted a handful about this process, and one of the challenges we've had with this, and this has been up for discussion for I want to say the better part of about 2 years, and I think, you know, we have made more progress in the past 6 months, many thanks to the work that Abigail's done formalizing this doc, and what I think the fundamental problem is with this approach, or not with this approach, but with this problem, is the fact that it spans so many different SIG, and it spans so many different parties that are involved, that, you know, to grasp it, you know, either by GitHub commit, by front matter, by however it's automated, generated, there's going to be hairy, thorny problems that we run into. And really, once again, going back to the communication piece, I don't think we can over communicate this piece enough. And I've said that no one should be caught off guard by us deprecating this stale content. And so what I see is, so this doesn't lose steam in the what ifs and the what about isms. I feel like we really need to find what is that MVP to get this off the ground and get it started. You know, whether it's, you know, maybe not even taking action day one, but starting the, you know, release team, getting them involved or up to speed on what processes could be done. Maybe there's an MVP script, maybe there's an MVP approach. Uh, Really, I'd hate to see this lose steam, especially how dragged out this has been, mainly due to the multiple complexities of it. I think it'd be in our best interest to simplify this as much as we can to get this to move forward. And I'd love to hear opinions or feedback on how we could roll this out effectively.
I just to agree, I definitely think that there's a lot of blockers of communication here. So like you pointed out, so I agree. Like, I think definitely doing something on like a much smaller scale and maybe only focusing on one SIG, like storage or something that have identifiable sections of docs that we can sort of run it against. And maybe we don't find stale content, or maybe we do, but we can have a little stale script to sort of put together to test just a very small section and sort of do like a little test, whatever, to sort of run this. That's how I was sort of thinking about rolling it out, but I agree we need to come up with a definite MVP of what we want to do.
Yeah. So you're proposing to do a pilot, essentially a pilot with the storage SIG. I haven't actually touched your doc repo. Are you using modular documentation where you have an assembly and modules that are included, or is it one file, one topic?
For the Kubernetes documentation, it's all just a single Kubernetes website repository. So it's all a bunch of flat files. They are grouped together in some subfolders in certain areas, but for the most part, one file equals one page on the Kubernetes website.
Okay, great. Yeah, that makes things a lot easier then.
Tim?
I think I've got a suggestion for an MVP, and I also want to scare people because I've got a list of stale content. We've got an issues tracker, and if I just look at the last page of the issues tracker, it lists the pages that we've had issues about the longest. So if we removed those, we'd remove config map, garbage collection, etc. These secrets, auto scaling, cron jobs, API resources, container lifecycle, images, volumes, garbage collection again, daemon set, and storage. Now, I think people would be worried if we removed those. And those issues, none of these issues is newer than 2018. They're all from 2017 or earlier.
Do you mean, sorry, like the part in the doc of like just removing content that wasn't updated? I just want to make sure I know what you're referring to.
I definitely don't like the idea of finding stuff that's not been updated in too long and removing it, because I can identify stuff that really has needed an update for a long time. And like for example, auto scaling. The page on auto scaling is poor. I know it's poor. I could write a better page, and if someone wants to fund me, I will. I'll put forward a proposal, and we can do that. But I don't work full time on Kubernetes, and I don't know if even if I did, that I could do it on my own. So it's fine. But I'm not sure that removal is the way forward. I'm not sure it's the stick that will get things done.
Yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying, and I don't remember where if I had it written down in here, but I know we had talked, Jim and I had talked about using, before really getting to the point of just like flat removing stuff, like that's not what we were trying to suggest. But sort of going through and trying to get help from the SIGs to sort of say that this content still needed, whatever, and having that process of checklist things to check before we remove stuff. And also using like the GitHub, the Google Analytics to see if it's like a widely used page, like we can't just remove it without having, very much making sure that this isn't going to disrupt people's lives, and then also over communicate when there is an actual deprecation. I don't think we have a deprecation process specifically for content on a site. So we might need to put together something like that to communicate when pages are going away, if they are no longer needed.
So here are two ideas. One is if we have a last review date, and for example, we could take all the stuff that's on that list I mentioned, cron job, auto scaling, secrets, find the pages that have had no commit within 3 years. Like they definitely, if they've got an open issue against them and they've not been updated in 3 years, I think we can confidently say we know what the last review date is and it's a while ago. Now that's great because Hugo, the site generator, can take that information and add a warning saying, sorry, folks, like this content is a bit stale and we know, here's the contribute button. We can add that with, I think, not much effort. We can target the oldest pages because we know those, and we can automate working out how old it is, and we can automate working out how long ago that was, and so on. Like that is a defined piece of work that we could hand off and I think take on.
Yeah, I think you just need to be a little bit careful with the messaging. Um, if it's done automatically, my fear is there's going to be a whole bunch of pages with that, and now people will lose confidence and trust in the quality of what we're doing, and I don't think that's fair to us.
There are only, so what I'm suggesting, Brad, I just want to clarify what I suggested. There are only 20 issues here. So, when I'm not talking about marking all of the pages necessarily as last reviewed, just the ones that we know are most likely to be out of date.
Yeah, with human intervention or done manually or done automatically?
Well, I think the important thing is we should not apply this across the site. We should select and
That was
like
my
a
point.
canary.
I think we
So
want to
if you
be
limit it to that group of things that I put a link to in the chat, it automatically is only a small subset of pages.
Right.
And I think I'm hearing the same thing from everyone here, and it's everyone's a little fearful of the automatic, ban hammer, removing hammer that we're potentially talking about here, and I don't believe that's the intent of this exercise or the intent of this MVP. The type of kind of fear, uncertainty, and doubt that we feel internally as a documentation area, you can only imagine becomes incredibly more when you're a SIG of the content we're talking about removing. And I do think there's a slow rollout is necessary. Lots of communication is going to be necessary, and I don't see us automating anything right out of the gate. And I think even something as an automatic Hugo warning about stale content is still a little bit offensive to somebody who's unaware of these changes coming through, from a SIG docs perspective. Uh, that would be great as a down the road state where, okay, this is well known. We've been rolling with this for 3 or 4 releases now. Now we've automated things that will say, hey, this content's probably stale. It hasn't been updated in X amount of time. Alternatively to a Hugo deprecation or a stale content type flag in the site itself is potentially whitelisting sites that don't need to be updated. Not that they couldn't be better, but if the fact is the matter is that the SIG is happy with the content, it is genuinely accurate to the best of their ability, and no one is going to make those changes, we would have the ability, we have the ability to add a allow list for things that aren't scanned or aren't addressed, and there's solutions here to these problems that aren't. We're gonna run a script and delete all the pages based on GitHub commit. I don't want to give that impression, and I don't believe Abigail wants to give that impression either. We'd have a lot of angry folks in different SIGs, knocking on our door.
And I don't know if it's easy to do, but instead of updating the page with a warning, I would prefer opening up an issue. So it's okay to create a whole bunch of issues that say, hey, these 10 pages are 4 years old and we're getting nervous. I think that doesn't hurt our perception as bad as, say, updating the actual docs. So if there's a way to do it that way, I think there'd be less concern.
Like, we have the issues. Like, look at page 20 of the issue list, the frozen ones. And I mean, maybe we want to give those visibility, maybe another label, beyond priority important long term. I think we're bad at project managing, is kind of, or bad at attracting people willing to take on updating a big concept page. It's a challenge.
Yeah, I think part of this is, I mean, it's like maybe like just like definitely a hopeful part of this is by being able to flag things to SIGs more regularly, to maybe get more eyes throughout the SIG without people necessarily having to go to the repo in that way. So we can kind of poke people a little bit more frequently, which hopefully will get more people in the SIG to kind of contribute. It's definitely kind of a wishful thinking, sunny day attitude. Because it still would take a lot of time to get these pages updated from someone in the community. So that's hopefully a positive effect of this project. But I hear what you're saying, that we need to, like Tim, with the older issues and getting eyes on them.
So what about implementing a script that would add a notice to a page that there's an issue open against it? And then when the issue is resolved, that would go away.
Again, throwing issues on pages makes me a little bit nervous. We've put a lot of years into building up a pretty good perception of the docs. I think there's real problems here, and I think there's, one thing we could think about is, Jimmy, we got the planning meeting coming up, is if we can identify, say, the top 5 most awful candidates, the top 5 most stale pages, and maybe each one of us takes one and we become a liaison to the SIG to keep reminding them. I'm going to say liaison, but I really mean nag. But just say, hey, we just want to show up in the meeting and every so often say, hey, just want to remind you, this page is really out of date. Could somebody take a look? So I don't mind going after the top priority ones. I just think I am a little nervous about any type of automatic slapping labels on all our content. Yeah, I know we've got some old content, but in general, those words can have a lot of meaning, and we've, could build up a bad optics that I don't think we really deserve. I think we've done okay. Yes, we've got 20 stale pages, and there are ways maybe to get some priority on them by us all being a liaison to a particular SIG. But I just would be a little caution about the automatic slapping of labels or things.
And I completely hear where you're coming from too, Brett. I totally get that, and I think that I would be more in favor of talking about folks becoming liaisons. I would like to see 5 folks become liaisons of this overall process as a whole. Document deprecation, making those communications clear. I see this as not a problem that's going to go away, and I think the more that we create and standardize a process around this and standardize how we handle stale content, not just tackling the 5 worst ones, because if we tackle those, we're going to have 5 other worst ones once those are resolved. That list will never change. And I think really what we need to do here is put the onus on the SIGs that have the stale content, because at some point we're, as a documentation organization, will not be able to provide the content to make that documentation unstale or, no longer stale. But I completely agree though, going around the removal hammer or, scripting and automating everything under the sun probably isn't the initial solution. As we figure out what works and what doesn't work, I do believe automation will come into play. But I think initially it's going to be a lot of communication. The liaison aspect of it I like a lot, but I would say instead of focusing on specific docs, focus on those liaisons being advocates of this, process and improving this process as a whole. But yeah, I completely agree though. We can't, just start going around yanking pages.
So maybe a good topic for the planning meeting, because I'm sure some of us are willing to volunteer, and I'll take a SIG, somebody else take a SIG. We figure out which pages, and we liaison / nag / educate / all the positive ways you want to spend that.
I want to ask kind of Abigail, if we used basically Google Analytics and combined that with information about when documents topics were last updated, or we looked and we maybe combine that as well with the list of the age of issues and the priority, could we take that, like, which are we on the right lines to identify which SIGs to reach out to first?
I think that we could. It's not something that I have looked into, but I think that we can really look at what are doing a combination of what you said to sort of identify the areas that are maybe the most stale or the most prevalent or whatever, and put that into practice for maybe a list of, instead of pages, but SIGs to sort of coordinate with.
I mean, I can make that list in my head, and it'd be interesting to see if everyone else's list in their head comes up. I'm not going to say it. Everyone else comes up with the same list, or whether the evidence gathering comes up with a different list. I think that'd be interesting. If the evidence gathering comes up with a different list, we should look at the evidence.
So real quick, just to be considerate of everyone's time here, we got about a minute left. It sounds like there's still further discussion to happen on this topic. I think this discussion that we just had was great around here, and I believe that there's still more to talk about. So I suggest that we punt this to the next meeting as well. As long as Abigail is able to attend, we can pick this up where we left off. I did want to give a quick shout out that we are going to do our quarterly planning on Thursday, February 18th at 5 p.m. Pacific. I'll send out a meeting invite here shortly after this call today, as well as a document in our Slack channel. For those who are just joining us who don't know, the quarterly planning talks about what we accomplished in the previous quarter, as well as what we want to do in the upcoming quarter. It's the ability to talk about some of the larger projects that we want to accomplish. That's just, we can't talk about in our, hourly meeting or, week to week in Slack. some of the overarching pieces here, much like this this effort that Abigail's leading to resolve stale content. That was one of our quarterly goals last time we got together as a example of what those quarterly efforts look like. So calendar invite coming there. Brad, we're at time, but do you want to give a quick shout out to your localization topic you have?
Yeah, just real quick, and I can follow up with you afterwards. So the idea is the localization teams find it very valuable in the PR title to have a prefix with the language that identifies the language in brackets, because how the tools they use to search for PRs, having something to search for in the actual PR topic is very, very helpful. So the teams have all agreed that they're going to try, or several of the teams have agreed to start adding that as a prefix. And the ask was, when you create your PR, there's that boilerplate that's created that says, hey, it's in the comments. The question was, is it possible for us to add a little message inside there saying, hey, if you're doing a localization PR for a specific language, could you add the following code in the actual PR title so it can be easily searched? And I had, so I was the one to make the request and then see, could we do this, and how do we do this, and add that in. So just a quick discussion there. I mean, does the idea make sense? Any concerns for why they want to put that in? I know we have the label, but the label only helps in certain situations. So having it in the PR title helps too.
I've got no issues with it. It sounds reasonable to me. The only thing that I would be interested to know is if it impacts anything with the CI robot, which I doubt it would. But I know we've had things with usernames and commit messages being in the title causing conflict. I can't imagine why brackets would cause an issue, but I've seen weirder stuff.
Well, they're already doing it manually, and it's not hurting. So
Gotcha.
So it's already being done a little bit. So it's just the adding the message for new contributors in that little welcome PR message. And is that just a standard template somewhere that I can update? I can follow this up offline with you, Jim, and hopefully you can point me to, hey, Brad, you should have known this, but it's right here.
No, there's definitely a file, and I can definitely help you out with that, or someone else on Slack, and we can definitely look at making that change for sure. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments around that change? Cool. All right. Well, I know we're a little bit over. Appreciate y'all sticking with us. Great discussion today, and I look forward to chatting with y'all more. Have a good one.